Good morning. We are back to the book Liberation. Today we are going to study chapter 12, A Mission of Love. Before we start the chapter, because the chapter covers the story of Saldanha and his former family on earth when he was incarnated. Let me give you a reminder of his story so we can be more up to date with what happened to him and how he came to be the leader of the group of obsessors persecuting Margarida, who is very dear to Gubbio's heart. Gubbio is the leader of the organization of the team of Andre Luiz and Eloy that are there trying to rescue Gregorio, the leader of the lower zones. So Saldanha, when he was incarnated, he had a modest family, a modest means. When he discarnated, went back to the spiritual world, he left behind a wife, a son, struggling with difficulties, financial difficulties, that got married very early to Irene, and he was working in a modest position when he was accused of a crime he didn't commit, and he was condemned and sent to jail. He lost his mind, became in a way, like we say in the physical world, crazy, right? Mentally disturbed, and was put in an institution. His wife in the physical world, she killed herself drinking poison, and his mother, Saldanha's former wife, discarnated very soon out of disgust and suffering. Their small daughter was adopted by a family. So Saldanha, trying to prevent all this from happening from the spiritual world, became more and more angry and frustrated, and used this anger and frustration to associate himself to Gregorio's team, and was given the responsibility by Gregorio to cause to be the lead of the obsession in Margaridas, to cause her to discarnate. This is all what we've been studying throughout this book. So now we have we studied last month another trial from Gabriel and Margarida to go to a doctor, to a medium that was of no use to them. They came back home without any improvement on Margarida's condition. So that's where we find ourselves, and where we start this chapter 12, A Mission of Love, which is the most transformative chapter of the book, and one of the most beautiful ones. And we are going to see why on this. So, Philip, can you read for us? Okay. You're on mute, Philip. Yeah, okay.
A Mission of Love. We went back to the couple's home, where we waited expectantly. Meanwhile, in the middle of the night, Saldanha told us he was going to visit his son in the hospital. I was shocked when our instructor asked Saldanha if we could go with him. Margarida's persecutor was somewhat surprised too. He agreed, but wanted to know why. Maybe we can be of some help, Gubbio responded optimistically. Saldanha took strict precautions and told Leoncio, one of the two implacable hypnotizers, to stand in for him while he was at the hospital. Among the many victims of dementia undergoing cruel readjustment, George's situation was truly heartbreaking. We found him lying face down on the cold cement of his primitive cell. His unmoving face was resting on his wound-covered hands. The father, who until that moment had seemed impermeable and hardened, looked at his son with visible anguish in his tear-filled eyes and explained with infinite bitterness in his voice, "He is obviously resting after one of his fits." Georges' insanity and anguish was not the only situation that inspired compassion, however. Right next to him, connected to his vital circle, his discarded mother and wife were absorbing his organic resources. They too were stretched out on the floor, semi-lethargic, as if they were experiencing awful pain.
Irene, a suicide, was holding her right hand to her throat, the perfect picture
of someone experiencing the dolorous effects of having poisoned herself, whereas her mother was embracing her son, gazing fixedly at him. Both women were displaying unmistakable signs of inner torment. Fluids that looked like a viscous blob covered their brains from the top of the spinal cord to the frontal lobes, and were especially heavy around the motor and sensitive areas. The two women were concentrating on poor Georges' energies as if he were the sole bridge for communicating with the existence they had left behind, demonstrating their complete dependence on the base interests of the physical life.
Thanks, Philip.
Okay.
So what we have here, Saldanha tells the group, Gubbio, Andre Luiz, and Eloy, that he was going to visit his son in the hospital. And Andre Luiz, remember, Andre Luiz's reactions are our reactions if we were faced with the same situation, right? So he was shocked when Gubbio asked Saldanha if they could go with him. Saldanha was surprised but agreed. Left Leoncio, one of the two hypnotizers in charge of Margarida, and they go to the asylum where they find Jorge's situation truly painful. He was lying down on the floor with his face down and resting his head on his hands. Now, the first important thing here, Saldanha, who until that moment has looked impermeable and hardened, gets moved with anguish and has tear-filled eyes when he sees his son. So it's a reminder that it's very important that we always remind ourselves that even the most hardened criminals have their loved ones and have their emotions. So it's just a matter of when you are going to treat these very difficult characters, it's how to find the weak links or the points where they will open themselves to the assistance. We find that every Monday on our spiritist meetings, mediumship meetings, when we talk to spirits, and we enter into sometimes useless discussions with them until we find that point or that other spirit that is going to move them and allow the opening to have this conversation, to have this discussion with them. So we find that Saldanha's problem is with his son. But when Andre Luiz look at the son, at Jorge's, he sees next to him, connected to his vital circle, the discarnate mother and the wife, who are there absorbing his organic resources. So we see here a case of obsession out of love and ignorance, not out of hatred, not out of desire of vengeance, but out of ignorance. When they did both, they discarnated, one through suicide, the other one by anguish and sadness. They didn't know where to go. Their thoughts were completely focused, almost, not completely because they are not ovoids, but almost solely on Jorge's. So they connect with him immediately, and he has no defenses, so he allowed them to connect to them. So Andre Luiz describes them as also stretched on the floor, semi-lethargic, as if they were experiencing pain. And his wife, a discarnate mother and wife, absorbing his organic resources. So we find here a connection that is really a connection out of love in the origin that they cannot overcome with a healthier thoughts. So Andre Luiz describes Irene holding her throat, someone that poisoned oneself, and the mother was embracing the son, but without really understanding what was going on. So they were concentrating on Jorge's energies because sorry, he was the connection with the physical life that they had just left behind, and they didn't know yet how to disconnect. So they are completely dependent on the physical life they left behind, and the only thing they know how to is to connect to it through Jorge's. So a lot of sad situations described here, but it's important for us to understand some things here, why they are all in this situation, right? Why they are not being assisted by the spiritual benefactors? Well, they are. It's just, again, as a matter of, we always say, they need to open themselves for the assistance. Their minds are closed in their own thoughts. Jorge allowing the mother and the former wife, the wife, to connect to him. Remember, he was found guilty and he was sent to jail. And with this, the mother and the wife died and connected to him, because that's all he could think of them, also in guilty, in pain, and they didn't know anything better. The wife committing suicide, of course, she's guilty of this selfish act of eliminating oneself's life, and the mother, out of despair and out of sadness, that loses her physical life and connects to him, the only thing that she knows what to do. We'll see more details of that later. Okay, any questions here? Any comments? Okay, so
I think just as a reminder,
yes,
and Ron explained that very well, that his situation, George's situations, his psychiatric disease was not a result of this so-called obsession. He was there before even, okay? It may be augmented, may be exacerbated by the draining of energies of those two individuals, but it's not the cause of his psychiatric problems.
Yes, good point. Okay, Philip, go ahead.
They're crazy, Saldana said. obviously trying to be agreeable. They can see me, but they neither understand nor recognize me. They are like children assailed by pain. They had hearts of porcelain that shattered all too easily. Furrowing his brow in insufferable bitterness, he added, very few women can hold the fort amid the wars of retribution. They usually succumb rather quickly, overcome by useless tenderness. Wanting to annul our companion's vibrations of anger, our guide cut his destructive statements short, confirming sadly, actually, they are in a state of profound hypnosis. Our two sisters here have not yet been able to awaken from the nightmare of suffering in the trance of death. They are like a traveler who is about to cross a raging river without the means needed to reach the other side. In the final moments of their physical bodies, both women focus all their loving concern on Georgie, combining their tortured energies with his, and they appease themselves amid the fluids of their own creation, much like the Bombex Mori, immobilized and dormant amid the threads that it itself has woven.
Margarida's obsessor grasped these remarks with an undisguised look of surprise and said more calmly,
no matter how much I tried to make myself known by yelling my name in their ears, they can't hear me. They do moan long, disconnected phrases sometimes, but their memories and awareness seem completely dead. If I insist and carry them away from him, anxiously trying to infuse them with new life so that they can help me carry out our revenge, my efforts are futile, because as soon as I release them, they rush back to Georgie, as if they were bits of iron drawn by a powerful magnet. Yes, I know, agreed the guide. They are temporarily crushed by fear, hopelessness, and suffering. Due to their lack of continuous, well-coordinated mental effort, they have not been able to expel the coagulating energies of the despondency they themselves rebelliously cause when faced with the demands of the everyday struggles of earthly life. And they have indifferently caved in to deplorable torpor, in which they feed on George's energies. Constantly drained of his psychic reserves, the patient, hypnotized by both, lives amid hallucinations and despair that are, of course, incomprehensible to those around him.
thank you. So, Saldanha starts talking here that they can see him, but they cannot understand or recognize him. So the mother and the daughter-in-law, they see him every time he goes there, but he doesn't know how to deal with them. We know that by his characteristics of a spirit that is inferior spirit that is dedicating himself to persecute others. His energies, there are no energies of love. They're capable of assisting them. So in the state of mental disturbance that they both are, they see him because they vibrate at the same level, but they don't understand what's going on and they don't recognize him. That's very important. We talk about situations in the spiritual world where spirits are surrounded by those that vibrate at the same level, but that does not mean that we recognize each other, because it depends on our mental state. They both their focus it's only on Jorge's. So everything else they don't understand or recognize. They are like Saldanha said, they are children assailed by pain. And then Saldanha goes on and say that that's a general problem with women, which is not really true, but that's how he sees it, right? That they succumb rather quickly. But what is important here, Gubbio doesn't allow him to go on. There is no point in someone complaining and complaining and complaining. That's a very important lesson for us. When we're listening to someone, when we are giving someone our time and our patience, we need to know when to stop the complaints, because all these complaints that Saldanha was starting to do here and to talk about them serves no purpose. There's no positive benefit out of all this complaining that he was going to go on and on and on. Gubbio knows better, so he cut his destructive statement short, and then he starts talking that the two sisters have not been able to awake from the nightmare that they caused to themselves through their death, because one is what we call a suicide in the sense of a suicide, right? Conscious suicide. She committed suicide. She poisoned herself. The Saldanha's wife, Jorge's mother, is what we can call sometimes an unconscious suicide, because she died out of despair and sadness. So she ended up abbreviating her life, not consciously, but unconsciously, and find herself in this nightmare state without understanding what really happened to her. So Gubbio says that in final moments of their physical body, everything that they could think was their loving concern on Jorge. But again, it's a selfish love. They can only think on Jorge because they cannot think of anything else. And it's a sick love, right? Because it doesn't help. It's not love in the sense of how we understand love. That is a positive thing. It's a negative type of love that causes pain and causes suffering. And then he compares here with this larva, the Bombyx mori, which is a silkworm that before changing into another, during the transformation from the worm into forgot the word, builds itself, wovens itself the silk that surrounds it and gets paralyzed during the transformation, is a protection during the transformation and defenses, but also immobilizes it. So he's comparing, Gubbio is comparing the two women that the fluids of their own creation immobilize them around Jorge. And then Saldanha says that no matter how much he tries to connect to her, yelling his name, they cannot hear. They are just suffering, struggling. They talk disconnected phrases. Saldanha is able to separate them from Jorge, but remember when we talk about when we study the separation of obsessor and obsessed, it has to be in a way that they want to be separated. In this case, nobody wants to be separated here. Jorge, his vibrations attract them, and their vibrations bring them rushing back to him. So like Gubbio says, as bitter, Saldanha says, bits of iron drawn to a powerful magnet. And then Gubbio explains, because of their lack of continuous, well-coordinated mental effort, they haven't been able to expel these energies that they cause themselves when faced with the demands of the struggles of earthly life and cause their own death. And they enter into this state of torpor in which they feed on Jorge's energy. And Jorge, by his side, is hypnotized by both of them and lives in hallucinations. So for those, the incarnate ones, the doctors that see him, it's all of this is incomprehensible, that they cannot see beyond the physical body. They only see a mental disturbed patient, or what we used to call, as Jorge calls, crazy patient here, right? A mental disturbed patient with without any ability to improve. And of course, he's just thrown into a cell without any careful care. Okay, difficult situation, very hard, but some important lessons for us here. Comments here?
Can I go to back page again?
Sure.
We try to explain things so very often, and that it's hard to explain. This process of discarnation, of living the physical life and totally engage on the spiritual life back in the spiritual world, sometimes becomes so hard to explain this transition period, so to say. And I think this sentence is so absolutely perfect that we see the value of let the Spirit to guide us. I say, they are like travelers who is about to cross a radiant river without the means needed to reach to the other side. So the body died, done. The discarnation, technical discarnation process of those up to 72 hours, all the links to the material body is completely done. It's done. So they are now on that river, trying to reach the other side, unable to, because there are forces that are still energies pertaining to the physical world, hold them back to really cross to the other side of that river and really engage on a spiritual life that should be by that point. And of course, that energy is the, I don't really like the word love, but the attraction, the passion towards the George at that moment. And we see that very so often in our meetings, that we cannot really try to understand or explain so well why spirits who perhaps been discarnate for years are still not back into the spiritual world. They are so more focused to things pertaining to this side over here. They some of them are even accept the idea that they have left the physical life behind, does not understand and not comprehend. This is exactly because of that. They have not yet really crossed to the other side yet. Of course, this is a figure of expression, is an analogy, right? But it's exactly as if they hold themselves on that gray zone without really coming to the other side, become truly or truly accepting their present situation as a discarnate spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very, it's very important for us to understand the process here, because we talk about life in the spiritual world, we discuss it a lot, and this is a clear example of disturbed minds going back to the spiritual world without any knowledge, without any understanding, without any awareness of their situation. They are completely unbalanced, and they cling to what they know, right? And we see this a lot when those that are going back to the spiritual world without awareness of the spiritual world. They cling to what they know, and because they did this to themselves and they are not opening themselves to receive the assistance, they found themselves in this situation. But there is always help, and we are going to see. Now that the help arrives and starts. And why do they receive the help? Because it's time. They have shown, it doesn't say here, but when we show any openness to receive assistance and help, the help and assistance is there. If it was not Gubbio, it will be another team of spirits. But in this case, it was Gubbio. Thankful for us that we can follow the rescue process. Okay.
Shall I?
Yes, go ahead.
With sincere willingness to serve, Gubbio sat down on the cement floor and in a gesture of extreme compassion, put their heads on his fatherly lap. As the tormentor of the women he planned to save looked on skittishly, Gubbio gave him a kindly look and asked him, Saldana, would you allow me to do something for them? The persecutor's face changed. Judging from the smile that came over his formerly unpleasant and dark look, our guide's spontaneous gesture had disarmed his heart, smiting his innermost fibers. Oh yes, please do, he said almost kindly. That's what I myself have been trying to do, but couldn't.
Highly impressed by the lesson we were receiving, I contemplated the surroundings.
Comparing them with those of the room where Margarita was going through such affliction and torment. The impediments here were much harder to overcome. The place was filthy. In the adjoining cells, vile-looking spirits were walking around aimlessly. I was amazed to see that a few of them displayed animal-like characteristics. The atmosphere was suffocating, saturated with clouds of dark substances formed by the imbalanced thoughts of the deplorable incarnates and discarnates wandering around. Faced with such a situation, I asked myself, since our guide loved Margarita as a spiritual daughter, why hadn't he rendered her such Christian assistance as this? But as I watched the kindness with which our magnanimous mentor was solving the afflictive problem that was tormenting her adversary, his endeavor gradually enabled me to grasp the thrilling beauty of the gospel teaching. Love your enemy, pray for those who persecute and slander you, forgive 70 times, 7 times. As we looked on in wonder, Gubbio caressed the brows of the 3 suffering spirits. He seemed to be freeing each one from the heavy fluids that were keeping them benumbed in profound unconsciousness. After about a half hour of stimulating magnetic action, Gubbio glanced up at Saldana, who had been analyzing his tiniest gestures with doubled attention, and asked, Saldana, would you mind if I said a prayer? Saldana looked stunned. What? You actually believe in such a panacea? But immediately sensing our infinite goodwill, he said confusedly, well, okay, if you want to. Our instructor took advantage of the moment of sympathy, and lifting his thoughts to the higher realms, he prayed humbly, Lord Jesus,
our divine friend.
There are always those who pray for the persecuted, but very few remember to pray for the persecutors. Wherever we go, we hear prayers on behalf of those who obey, but we rarely hear prayers for those who command. There are many who pray for the weak so that they may be helped in time, but few are the souls that implore divine aid for the strong. so that they may be well guided. O Lord, your justice never fails. You know those who wound as well as those who are wounded. You do not judge according to the standard of our capricious desires, for your love is perfect and infinite. You do not incline yourself only to the blind, the sick, and the disheartened, for at the right time you help those who cause blindness, infirmity, and discouragement. If it is true that you save the victims of evil, you also seek out sinners, the unfaithful and the unrighteous. You did not despise the boastfulness of the doctors of the law, but talked lovingly with them in the temple of Jerusalem. You did not condemn the wealthy, but blessed their useful endeavors. In the home of Simon, the proud Pharisee, you did not scorn the wayward woman, but helped her with your fraternal hands. You did not forsake evildoers, but accepted the company of two thieves on the day of the cross. If you, O Master, the immaculate messenger, proceeded thusly on earth, who are we?
Indebted spirits that we are.
To condemn one another, light within us the clarity of a new understanding. Help us see our neighbor's suffering as our own. When tormented, we make us feel the difficulties of those who torment us, so that in your name we may overcome all obstacles. Merciful friend, do not leave us without guidance. Relegated to the limitation of our own sentiments, help us with our wavering faith. Disclose to us the common roots of life, so that we may finally understand that we are all brothers and sisters. Teach us that apart from sacrifice, there is no other law that can enable us evolve towards divine worlds. Enable us to understand our redemptive drama. Help us to transform hatred into love, because in our condition of inferiority, we only know how to transform love into hatred. When your will for us changes, our hearts are smitten and our feet wounded on the long journey due to our incomprehension. And that is why our minds aspire to the climbs of true peace with the same affliction that the weary traveler in the desert yearns for pure water. O Lord, infuse us with the gift of helping one another. You help those who did not believe in you.
You watched over those who did not understand you.
You reappeared to the disciples who forsook you. You bequeathed the treasure of your divine guidance, your divine knowledge, to those who forgot and crucified you. When compared with you, why would we, miserable worms in the dirt before a celestial star, be afraid of extending generous hands to those who do not yet understand us? The instructor impressed the last words with a touching tone. Eloy's and my eyes were full of tears, as were those of Saldana, who had retreated aghast to one of the dark corners of the depressing cell. Gubbio had gradually transformed himself. The vigorous vibrations of the prayer coming straight from his heart had expelled the darkened substances that he had taken on when he first entered the penal colony and met Gregorio. Sublimated light now shone on the face that the tears of love had compunction had made iridescent with unspeakable beauty. It seemed like he was hiding some unknown light source within his chest and forehead that shot out luminous rays of bright blue. At the same time, a lovely thread of incomprehensible light connected him to the higher realms before our bewildered eyes. After a pause, he intensified the luminosity with which he was enveloping the three persons he was sheltering with his prayer and implored. It is for thee, O Lord, for these who lie here in thick darkness, that we ask your blessings. Free them, O Master of light and compassion. Free them so that they may become balanced and recognize one another.
Help them
to evolve in the emotions of sanctifying love and to abandon the lower passions forever. May they feel your devoted affection because they too love you and seek you unconsciously, even though they are being tormented in the deep valley of dark and degrading sentiments. The instructor finished. An intense outpouring of light burst forth all around him from hands that were invisible to us.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Philip. It was a long reading, but we had to go through this because it's very important to have one full reading and understanding of the process of what Gubbio is doing here. So he sits Gubbio sits on the floor, put the heads of the three on his lap, the two discarnated and Jorge's, and he asked Saldanha if he could do something for them. Let's see here how humble and how the knowledge of Gubbio asking for the permission of Saldanha to help them. And you see when he's asking that Andre Luiz describes that Saldanha's face changes, and he gives a smile, and his heart was disarmed. And he says, please do. I have been trying to do. You see how you disarm someone that is immersed in their evil tendencies or in their inferior tendencies. And then it's very interesting, of course, Andre Luiz reaction here when because he compares the place they are with the room where Margarida was, because Margarida was in a nice house, in a good place, surrounded by persecuting spirits, but the house was not a filthy bad house per se. And this place, you know, the hospice is filthy. Of course, spirits there, very inferior spirits walking, wandering around, and some of them with animal-like characteristics, because all those individuals that live there, that are placed in this place, of course, they are all surrounded by this type of spirits. And Andre Luiz describes the atmosphere as suffocating. A reminder here that even in those dark places, there is always help and assistance, and there will always be spirits trying to help there. These are places that we should avoid if we cannot deal with the situation around us, if we are, instead of providing help, we get contaminated by the atmosphere. And that's the important difference here. When we are trying to help, we need to be able to withstand the surroundings to provide the help. And that applies to those in the spiritual world, that applies for us here in the physical world. Those that sometimes we get frustrated because of we look at situations and the ability of some people to help in very difficult places, and we think, I could never go to a place like that and do the same work. We can't. Sometimes we really can't. If we are not able, we are going to go to that place and it's going to harm us more than we are going to be able to help. But for those that are able to help, those places are the places that you go and you get more for yourself out of help, of helping those in need. And of course, Andre Luiz asks himself the question that we would ask also. Since Gubbio loves Margarida, why didn't he do this with her? Why he is waiting? Why he comes here in this filthy place to do the work and he hasn't done this to Margarida? What he was waiting, right? This is our questions. We would be asking the same questions. Of course, Gubbio, as an evolved spirit, he knows better and he knows the process. So he knows that by transforming the persecutors, he's going to be able to protect and help the persecuted. That's what he's doing here. And Andre Luiz begins to understand by remembering a couple of phrases from the gospel, right? The one from Matthew's, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute and slander you. And then the other passage from Christ when he tells Peter, forgive 70 times 7 times, when Peter asks Jesus, how many times should we forgive? And Jesus said, forgive indefinitely, infinitely, right? As many times needed. So Gubbio is holding these three spirits, suffering spirits, and he spends half an hour cleaning them with magnetic action, removing the darkness that surrounds them, the energies that surrounds them, providing the initial assistance. And then he asks if he could say a prayer. Remember, a prayer is the most effective way of helping and assisting. A sincere prayer, a prayer that comes from the heart, a prayer that connects us with the high. Of course, Saldanha, the first reaction is, why you believe in such panacea? And but okay, you're there working, do whatever you think it's right, because Saldanha is, they're just trying to help those three spirits that he cares for. He has no meaning of helping them, so he's seeing someone else doing it. Good, do the work that I can't. If you want to pray, go and pray. I don't believe in any of this, but go for it. And then Gubbio starts this beautiful prayer when he starts asking Jesus to help and assist the persecutors, because we always pray for those who are suffering, those who are persecuted, those who are struggling. And when we think about the situation that we are living in our world right now, that we see so much division and so much lack of understanding and acceptance of the other side, not saying which is one who is wrong or right, but there are persecutors and there are persecuted. And then Gubbio talks about the persecutors. We rarely hear prayers for those who command. How many are praying for those that are causing the wars out there? How many are praying for those who refuse to accept science as the way to overcome our challenges? How many of us are praying for those who are causing the pain, who are causing the destructions, the killings? We live in a situation right now where we have these killings around us, and everybody's praying for the victims, which is right, which is what we should do. But how many are praying for the killers? How many are praying for these imperfect spirits that are still immersed in their evil tendencies, those that cause blindness, infirmity, and discouragement? And then he says, that Jesus saves the victims of evil. But what about the sinners, the unfaithful, the unrighteous? Jesus is always assisting them and praying for them. And he gives some examples of Jesus in his life when he did not scorn the wayward woman, when he accepted the company of two thieves on the cross. So Gubbio is asking to help strengthen our faith so we can also pray for those who hate, for those who cause harm, for those that cause pain to others, because they are also victims of their own inferiority and their own evil tendencies. And he says, you help those who did not believe in you. You watch over those who did not understand you. And then when he finished that part, Andre Luiz describes how Gubbio has transformed himself. Of course, all three of them were with their eyes full of tears, and I imagine some of us have our eyes in tears also listening to this beautiful prayer. And he transforms himself. An evolved spirit irradiates inner light when they enter into this communication with the high. And of course, Gubbio has hidden his light since he entered the penal colony to meet Gregorio, not to call the attention. Remember, we talked about that. But now the light is pouring out of his heart, a light that he was not hiding, but he was preserving. And Andre Luiz describes this thread that connects him to the higher realms. You see, he tells that Andre Luiz describes that Saldanha, his reaction is to go to the dark corner, because those that are not used to the light still look for the darkness to hide from the light. So he was being transformed here, Saldanha, for sure, because we know this prayer has the power to transform all those around them, but he still has to get used to the light. Too much light blinds us, right? So he goes to the darkness to get used to the light and to get accustomed to what was happening there. So Gubbio finishes the prayer, continue asking the assistance of our Master Jesus, and Andre Luiz talks about the light burst that comes from around him, from hands that were invisible to us. So what Andre Luiz is saying here is that there is more than Gubbio there of enlightened spirits working, but of course at his level of evolution he cannot see them, hands that were invisible to us. This is beautiful passage. This is very touching, and I hope you could all understand the grasp a little bit of the beauty of this prayer. Okay, Elmo, anything to add here?
It's even hard to add anything. It's really an emotional passage in this book. In my cruelty, my ignorance, the first thing that I questioned myself was, what if Saldanha had said no? No, you cannot pray. I do not allow you to pray over here. Then what would be his response at that point, right? But I think Gubbio is pretty much aware, because as we say over here, that love is irresistible. And that's where we see the value of this statement, the truthfulness of this statement, that at the final end, when you peel ourselves of all the masks that you put over our true selves, there is the image of God in us, there is the presence of God in us, and that's love. And that's irresistible, that's within us. That the love that this man who have lost all his hope and faith in goodness shines because of those three words that are suffering, it becomes irresistible. And he sacrificed everything that he is at this moment, which is a hard, cruel being. He sacrificed himself for the three of them, and he allows the prayer to go through. And that's when we say the love is really irresistible. But it's not really the love, the external, it's the internal, it's what is inside of us that make us move in direction of that love. He is a man who I have nothing else to offer. I gave all that I am, and what I am right now is a cruel being, and that's not working. So there's got to be something better, and the only thing better is indeed love. And prayer is the ultimate expression of love, of course.
And what a prayer, right?
Yeah. And in the beginning, when I was kind of resistant of using the word love, is exactly in that sentence over there, help them to evolve their emotional sanctifying love and to abandon the lower passions forever. So when you say that those women was acting out of love, no, it's the opposite. There's a lot of passion. And in this prayer, God believe it's clear to evolve in the emotional sanctifying love and to abandon the lower passions forever. Because those lower passions are exactly that line that was holding those women were holding in the middle of that river, not being able to liberate themselves and go to the other side.
Yeah. It's again the word, the lack of words that we have in our language, right?
That's right.
Because what they feel for Jorge is not hatred, right?
No,
it's not despise.
Not.
It's not. It's, yeah, they call lower passions here. I think it's a good definition, right? Yeah. But what connects them all three is this this dependency on each other, right? But you see, the power of a prayer is what we just saw here, right? And we'll see now what it means to those three, right? As we continue, okay?
Yeah.
Shall I?
Okay. Yeah.
With obvious emotion, Gubbio began applying negative passes to each of the three wretches, and then said to the incarnate young man, "On your feet, Jorge. You are now free to expiate your wrongs." Jorge opened his eyes wide as if he were waking up from a terrible nightmare. The trouble and sadness had suddenly left his face. In an automatic impulse, he obeyed Gubbio's order and stood up in absolute control of his reasoning. Gubbio's measures had broken the ties that had bound him to his discarnate loved ones, liberating his psychic economy. After witnessing what had happened, Saldana cried out in tears, my son, my son." Jorge could not hear his father's enthusiastic exclamations, but went over to the humble cot and lay down in unexpected serenity. With his highest sentiments won over, Saldana approached Gubbio with the manners of a humble child that has acknowledged his teachers.
Superiority. But before he could grasp Gubbio's hands to kiss them, Gubbio said without presumption,
"Compose yourself, Saldana. Now our other two friends are going to wake up." He caressed Iracema's head, and Jorge's poor mother came to herself, exclaiming, "Where am I?" When she saw her husband standing there, she was overcome with emotion, called him by his nickname and shouted, "Help me! Where is our son, our son?" Then she began speaking as one who has just seen her beloved after a long absence. Margarita's obsessor was smitten in the innermost fibers of his soul and shed abundant tears. He instinctively looked at Gubbio, silently asking him for help. "What kind of awful dream was that?" asked the unfortunate sister, crying convulsively. "What a filthy place. Have we really crossed over?" In a fit of desperation, she added, "I'm afraid the devil's going to get me. The devil. Oh my God, save me, save me." Our instructor spoke some encouraging words to her and nodded towards her son, lying there beside us. She gradually composed herself and asked Saldana why he was so quiet, why he wasn't saying those loving and trusting words of days gone by, to which he answered meaningfully, "Irisina, I still haven't learned how to be useful. I can't comfort anyone."
At the moment, the reawakened, suffering mother remembered her companion in misfortune,
who still had her hand around her throat. Barely able to recognize her daughter-in-law, she exclaimed in grief, "Irene, Irene." Gubbio intervened with his awakening ability and began applying vigorous energies to Irene's cerebral centers.
Okay. So with the prayer, with the removal of the energies, the connections between the three, Gubbio was able to separate, and he finalized the separation, applying magnetic passes to each of, of the three. And then he tells Jorge, the incarnate one, on your feet, you are now free to expiate your wrongs, meaning go and sin no more, right? What Jesus said to the woman that was being stoned. Jorge still has his wrongs to face the consequences of it, but he was now free of the obsessions of these two women. So his mental illness that apparent to the doctors around him was gone. So he opens his eyes as he was waking for a nightmare, and he was in absolute control of his reasoning. It's interesting that when he says that, Saldanha looks at him and starts calling his son. Jorge could not hear his father. He felt something, and but he went to the cot that was there and lay down calmly, right? He achieved serenity, as he says here. And then Saldanha, seeing what just happened, approaches Gubbio, and of course, without knowing how to thank him, he was trying to to kneel or to kiss Gubbio's hand, but Gubbio tells him, "Compose yourself. We have more work to do here, so behave." And then Gubbio directs himself to Iracemas, who is George's mother and Saldanha's wife, and she wakes up from her numbness and asks, "Where is she?" But it's interesting that she knows that she's dead, because she asked, "Have we really crossed over?" She asked for the son immediately, because still is on her mind. That's what she's been focusing since she discarnated, was on her son. So it's the first thing that she asks is the son. Saldanha doesn't know what to do, of course, but now he knows that Gubbio knows what to do. So he looks at Gubbio and silently asks Gubbio for help because he has no idea how to proceed. And then the woman starts talking about this nightmare that she had, the dream, and looks around and sees this filthy place and asks for help, and she thinks that the devil is going to get her. Gubbio talks to her, says some encouraging words, and then appoints the sun. She gets better and composes herself. And then she looks at Saldanha and asks, why are you there quiet? Why are you not helping me? Why are you not saying the words that you used to say when we were both alive? That's what she meant here, when there's loving and trusting words, because we know that Saldanha, when he was incarnated, of course, he cared for his family, and he had some nice words for the family. But at his stage now, he says, he can't comfort anyone. He hasn't learned how to be useful. He just recently learned and realized that all that he has been doing since he went back to the spiritual world is wrong, plainly wrong. And he understands that he has no ability to do what's right yet. He hasn't learned that. But that is the mother. We see how she recovers. And then she looks at the other object of interest of her, who is Irene, her daughter-in-law, and he calls Irene. But we are going to see that because Irene committed suicide, is a much more difficult recovery. Iracema is an unconscious suicide. She spent a long time in this difficult state, but she's able to reorganize her mental thoughts much more efficiently than Irene is going to be, and we are going to see why when Gubbio starts to awaken her applying energies to Irene's cerebral centers. Okay. Any comments here? Elmo, anything to add?
No, not for me.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so let's see what happens to Irene now.
After a few moments, Saldanha's daughter-in-law stood up with a blood-curdling scream. She could barely talk. She gurgled loudly, prey to infinite anguish. Our vigilant guide held both of her hands in his and began applying soothing magnetic resources to her glottis and to her taste buds, especially thus calming her down somewhat. Although awake, the suicide had not yet fully come to her senses. She did not have the slightest notion of her physical body rotting away in the grave. It was a kind of complete somnambulism from which she had suddenly woke up. Finally, getting a hold of herself, she approached her husband and exclaimed in a stentorian voice, Jorge, thank God the poison didn't kill me after all. Please forgive my thoughtless deed. I'll recover and then avenge you. I'll murder the judge that condemned you to such cruel suffering. Contrary to what she had expected, her husband did not react, so she implored, listen to me. Where have I been sleeping for so long? Our daughter, where is she? However, Jorge, his perispiritual centers now detached from her direct influence, remained in the same phlegmatic and impassive attitude of
someone who was having trouble figuring out his situation.
Gubbio approached Irene and explained, compose yourself, my child. Me? Compose myself? No way. I want to go home. This prison is suffocating me. Who are you, mister? Please get me home. My husband has been wrongly imprisoned. He's obviously out of his mind. He doesn't listen to me, and my throat is being eaten away by deadly poison. I want my daughter and a doctor. Caressing the girl's brow, our instructor said in a sad tone, child, when the eyes of your body closed for good, so did the doors to the home close to your soul. Your husband is free of the commitments of marriage, and your daughter has been living in another home for a very long time. You absolutely must redo yourself so that you can help them as much as you want to. So, I really am dead. Death is a worse tragedy than life. Death is merely a change of dress, Gubbio explained. We are what we are. After the grave, we find nothing but the heaven or hell that we have created for ourselves. And softening the tone of his voice to speak more like a father, he continued, why did you dispose of the healing medicine by breaking the sacred vial that contained it? Why didn't you ever listen to the chorus of those who were suffering even more than you? Why didn't you ever heed the afflictions that came from deep within you? Why didn't you ever probe the silent suffering of those who had no hands to act, legs to walk, voice to beg? Because rebelliousness consumed me.
Yes, one mere moment of rebelliousness put one's destiny in peril, just as one tiny error in calculation threatens the stability of an entire building.
Oh, woe is me, grasped Irene, accepting the bitter reality. Where was God that he didn't help me in time? Your question is misguided, replied our guide kindly. Instead, ask yourself, if you ever tried to find out what led you to forget God so profoundly. The Lord's goodness never forsakes us. Since you forsook the blessed earthly opportunity that would have led you to spiritual victory, you now must live with the tears of contrition that will lead you to wholesome regeneration. I believe that soon you can attain such a blessing. However, you have carved out a huge precipice between your conscience and the divine harmony you will need to accomplish your recomposition. You will have to live with the consequences of your thoughtless act for quite some time yet. To pick green fruit is to practice violence. You poison the delicate matter that makes up the tissues of your soul, and few circumstances can mitigate the seriousness of your wrong. However, never give up hope. Press on towards the good. Even if the horizon at times seems too far away, it is never unreachable. And encouraging her paternally, he added, you'll make it, Irene, you'll make it. However, amid disappointment and rebelliousness, Irene did not seem interested in grasping such lofty concepts. Diverting her attention from the hard truth, she noticed Saldana and began to scream. Gubbio sought to calm her down. Once Jorge's wife overcame her own childish fear, she regressed to her mental intemperance, rested her tormented eyes on her father-in-law and asked, shade or ghost, what are you doing here? Why haven't you avenged your poor son? Doesn't such useless infamy pain you? Have you laid aside
the weapons you could use to smite the soulless judge that defiled our lives?
Did death make you forsake your devotion to your own parents? Are you going to take it easy in some sort of heaven and watch Jorge reduced to shreds? Or ignore the harsh reality? What compelled you to be silent as a statue? Why haven't you tirelessly sought God's justice, which cannot be found on earth? Her questions were like blows from a white-hot iron. Margarita's persecutor received them as an inner beating because his face was pale with extreme indignation. He wavered, not knowing how to react, but remembering he was in the presence of a wise and loving guide, he looked at Gubbio, silently asking for help. Gubbio said in a sad voice, "Irene, doesn't the certainty of victorious life beyond death infuse your heart with respect? Do you think we are subject to a power that is unaware of us? Before the new truth that has surprised your soul, can't you perceive the infinite wisdom of a supreme giver of all blessings? How can you find happiness in vengeance? The blood and tears of our enemies only deepen the wounds that have opened up in our hearts. Do you think that the true dedication of a father should manifest as lacerations or murder, persecution or rage? Saldana came to this prison out of love, and I believe that his finest victories have risen, triumphant and renewing to the surface of his personality. Don't cast his fatherly tenderness into the abysm of despair, from whose darkness you have uselessly sought to flee. The wretched woman fell silent in tears while her father-in-law wiped away those that Gubbio's benevolent remarks had elicited from him. Iracema said that she was exhausted and asked for a cot. Our guide asked Saldana to say something. Although Jorge was feeling better, both discarnate women were in need of immediate help. It would not be right to abandon them to that environment, which could disintegrate the strongest mental energies.
Certainly, agreed Margarita's greatly changed obsessor. I know the miscreants around here.
And now that Iracema and Irene have come to their senses, I'm concerned about the seriousness of the situation. Our instructor said that we would shelter them in a nearby hospital, but we needed his permission. Saldana happily acquiesced. Because of our guide's cordial words, he felt stimulated to do what was right, and he showed himself willing to grasp the smallest opportunity to correspond to Gubbio's fraternal dedication. A few minutes later, we left the mental institute with the two women and took them to the hospital, where Gubbio got them admitted with all the prestige of his heavenly virtues before the visible amazement of Saldana, who did not know how to express the gratitude in his soul. As we were returning, Margarita's persecutor, head down and humiliated, timidly asked what the right weapons were to use in the work of salvation. Our guide answered attentively, in all settings, great love can always assist lesser love to expand its boundaries and impel it towards the higher realms. And everywhere, great victorious and sublime faith can help small wavering faith, carrying it to the heights of life. Saldana said nothing, and we went most of the way back in silence.
Thanks, Philip. I know it was a long one, but it didn't make sense to stop because it's one story here, right? Irene, of course, because she committed suicide, she's in a much more unbalanced state. She's not able to put her thoughts, even with the help and assistance of Gubbio, to put her thoughts in order. She's awake now, aware, but still with her thoughts completely disconnected. So She has difficulty speaking, of course, because she damaged her throat with the poison. Gubbio is treating her throat, and when she can talk, she immediately thinks that she's not dead. She took the poison, but the poison didn't kill her, and she focused on the avenge on the judge that condemned her. But she's not able to connect to him anymore, because Gubbio was able to disconnect her from him. Remember, he's incarnated, he's there in his cot. And then she starts asking, where is the daughter? And Gubbio approaches her and asks her to calm down, but she's in no condition to calm down. She says she wants to go home. She's, what happened, my husband, and all the things that we know before. And then Gubbio explains to her that her physical body was dead, that she went back to the spiritual world, that her husband was free of her, including all the commitments of marriage. The daughter has been living in another home. And then she realizes that she's dead. But now she sees death as a worse tragedy than life, which is what happens to many suicides, because they kill themselves trying to escape life, and life continues. So they find themselves in a worse situation than they were trying to run away from. Gubbio explains that death is really only a change of dress. We leave the physical body behind, we continue to be ourselves. We are what we are. We find nothing but the heaven or hell we have created for ourselves. That's something that we keep always saying, right? The moment we leave our physical body and wake up on the other side, we haven't changed a bit. Of course, the experience may affect us and change us a little, but we are who we are, with our qualities and imperfections all present in us as eternal spirits. And then Gubbio asks her very important questions that we need to think when we are facing difficulties. Why didn't you ever probe the silent suffering of those who had no hands to act, legs to walk, voice to beg, the chorus of those who are suffering more than you? There are always those that are suffering more than us, and we have to think of them when we are going through our struggles. And she says that she was consumed by rebellions. And of course, the question that we always ask ourselves when we are going through pain and suffering: where is God? Why isn't God helping me? And Gubbio very wisely answers that your question is misguided. What has led us to forget God? Because God never forsakes us. And that's the important question we have always to remember. God is always with us. Remember the 1,000 veils that we place between us and God. There are no veils between God and us. But he says that because you committed suicide, you have carved a huge precipice between your conscience and the divine harmony. And you have to find balance again. Live with the consequences of this act for some time until she recovers. It will take her one or more reincarnation to recover from the damage that she caused to herself. But as Gubbio says here, even if the horizon seems far away, it's never unreachable. But she still is not prepared to, or very interesting in hearing these concepts. She finds Saldanha and starts screaming again and asks, what is he doing there? Why is he not doing anything? Avenge your son. Go after the judge. And she goes on, and of course she affects Saldanha. He feels hit by her words. He feels like he's receiving a beating, and he didn't know what to do. And he looks at Gubbio. Gubbio, of course, knowing how to act, talks up to her again about eternal life. Haven't you understood that we are eternal souls, we live eternally? Do you think that murder and persecution and rage is going to transform us? That Saldanha has changed, and his good side has risen, renewing, and for her not to continue with in this abyss of despair that she tried to flee when she committed suicide. Finally, she becomes quiet. Gubbio asks Saldanha to say something, but he says that they had to move them to a better place. That was not a place to stay. But Gubbio says that, again, he needs Saldanha's permission to move them to a nearby hospital. Of course, he agreed, and Saldanha is changed. He was showing himself willing to accept any opportunity that Gubbio is offering him. So they are put in a mental, they left the mental institution, and these two women are taken to a spiritual hospital where they are going to receive the treatment they need. Of course, Iracema is going to recover much quicker, and is going to be able to move forward. Irene is going to take a longer time, and going to take much more effort and work for her to recover and put on the path of redemption. And then we finish with these beautiful words from Gubbio on how to help. Great love can always assist lesser love to expand its boundaries. So this passion that Elmo chose wisely the words, Gubbio calls here lesser love, to expand its boundaries and impel towards higher realms. And great, victorious, and sublime faith can help small, wavering faith carrying it to the heights of life. So we can use our small, wavering faith and ask for assistance of those who have sublime faith, so we can carry our small faith to the heights of life. So then they go back to the house, and that's the end of this transformative chapter that really touches all of us. And I open now for any additional comment.
It's an amazing, powerful chapter. I'm so sorry people have missed it.
Yes. Yes, I was hoping we will have more people, but you know, those that are here, I hope had the opportunity to be touched, also to be moved, and to understand some of the realities of our life in the spiritual world, and the transformative power of prayer, of love, of dedication.
You know, on Renato's lectures last week, I made a comment at the end that through all of the lessons they received from Paul of Tarsus, from Emmanuel, in terms of leadership, at no point they express knowledge as a factor, right? It's all about love. It's all about dedication. In any point, those more elevated spirits says, to understand the techniques, that how it works, the process of integration of the two perispirits, and so that we study that is so important. Nobody's denying it. But all of that without love, it comes back to Paul of Tarsus's beautiful expression: without love, no, nothing means no. The sounds not without love means nothing. We see expressed in this chapter, in this lesson that we received here today. And I will be the first one to defend Spiritism and what we do over here, and try to explain things, that the techniques, what is behind of it. Because if it's these two women understood, had the knowledge, even if only the intellectual knowledge of the process of discarnation of our truly belong in the spiritual world, it would help them to be able to apply that knowledge and be more conforming, be better able to allow love to do its magical things. That is the true value of knowledge here, that without love, it's not going to be very useful, but it's at any time, knowledge is useful. These two women knew that they were in the know. I love the analogy of the river. I'm going to go back to that as many times as I can remember it. They should just be able to let go of that rope that was tying them at the middle of the river, not being able to cross over, only to have that knowledge that I know that I'm dead, I have to let it go. I cannot be held tight to the things pertaining to matter any longer, would make such a big help for them. And that is the great value of having this intellectual knowledge. Of course, love is the center of everything, but have that inkling of understanding of knowledge can be so useful.
Yeah. If they had love, real love, but no knowledge, they wouldn't be there also.
Yes.
So knowledge is second best, but in their case, they didn't have any of those, right?
Especially for Irene, right? Irene demonstrated in her speech that she was extremely bitter, right? Her speech towards Saldanha shows that she has tremendous amount of cruelty in herself to deal with, which perhaps prompted her to take the drastic decision to commit suicide. Iracema, on the other hand, was misguided, just lack of knowledge, but she did not have this contaminated heart, so to say. Irene, on the other hand, I think in her speech, she shows that she was quite bitter. She has good amount of cruelty by the desire for revenge.
Yeah, and of course, it will take much longer time for her to recover.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all. So next Sunday, second Sunday, we're going to study the gospel according to Spiritism. And I'm going to ask Carol to do our final prayer now.
Yes, John, thank you so much. And thank you, Phil. Thanks so much, Phil.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was a lot. John and Elmo. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks for the opportunity to be together today for our studies of the book Liberation, Chapter 12. It's very important that we now have a better understanding of the compassionate work of the high order spirits, the helpers, and their interaction in the fraternal healing and the prayers for difficult incarnate spirits, disincarnate spirits. We remind ourselves that we will have our good qualities as well as our imperfections when we return to the spiritual world. Importantly, that we keep love, knowledge, and prayers as our keys. We are very grateful to our spiritual benefactors, the protector spirits, the good spirits, for their willingness to be with us, to guide us, to help us as we do our part in assisting this process. We continue with our prayers for those who are suffering in our world, locally, statewide, worldwide, globally, of course. And we also must include those who are the persecutors of the suffering. Let us remind ourselves that our prayers are very vital at this time, during the time of great difficulties and upheavals. We know that goodness will reign, but we are assisting to help this to make it a reality. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies, and with our mindfulness, knowing that we are not alone, that is assistance is with us as we ask for assistance and we do the part that we can play. May we receive the love, the light, and the peace of Christ within us, keeping our life bright, glowing, heartfelt, and compassionate. And as we conclude this meeting today, we offer all our prayers worldwide for greater assistance, for healing, for greater knowledge, awareness, compassion, perseverance, and faith. And as we close, we humbly ask now for safety and protection as we go forth to family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. And may we remind ourselves to remain beacons of light, vigilant, faithful, and continuing to do the very best that we can each day through compassionate actions, through greater listening, through greater kindness. And therefore, may we be beacons of light in our world. So be it.